I can't lose them. God, please, Maya whispered into the phone, her voice shaking as tears slid down her dark cheeks and dropped onto the cracked concrete of the alley behind the diner. She had one hand pressed flat against a cold brick wall, like it was the only thing holding her up, and the other hand crushed a small blue phone so hard her knuckles turned white. From the half-open back door, Chef Joe Russo froze with his hand still on the metal handle, the smell of frying onions rolling out past him into the chilly Cleveland air as he tried to make sense of what he was hearing. Maya's black curls were stuffed under a faded red Heartland diner cap, the same one she wore every day, but now it looked too big on her, like she had shrunk inside herself. You can't close it, Pastor Mike, she choked, shaking her head. Where are they supposed to go? They already don't have dinner most nights. You can't just move them again like they're trash. Joe frowned, caught on the words, them, and move and trash, feeling like he had stepped into a movie where he didn't know the plot. He had come out here ready to yell at her for skipping her break again, but the anger in his chest suddenly felt small and stupid as he watched her shoulders shake with every soft sob. Inside, the ordered tickets kept sliding onto the rail, printers beeping, oil popping, someone shouting that table 7 needed a refill on fries. But Joe stayed where he was, halfway between the hot, bright kitchen and the gray alley. We're full already, Maya whispered into the phone, wiping her face with the back of her hand. The church basement can't take any more kids. There has to be something else. Please, just give me a little time, okay? I'll figure it out. She listened, nodding even though the person on the other end couldn't see her, then ended the call and sucked in a sharp breath, pressing her thumb hard into her eyes. For a second, she just stood there, breathing fast, and Joe thought he should go back inside, pretend he had not heard a thing, but his feet felt glued to the floor. Then Maya straightened her back like a soldier, pulled in a long, shaky breath, and turned toward the door, and Joe had just enough time to step away and let it swing shut so she wouldn't know he had been there at all. The morning had started like every other busy Saturday at Heartland Diner, with gray slush on the Cleveland sidewalks and a line of people in puffy jackets waiting for pancakes and hot coffee, and Joe barking orders over the hiss of the grill like some kind of orchestra leader with a bad temper. Maya had danced between tables since 6 a.m., coffee pot in one hand, ticket book in the other, her easy smile winning even the grumpy regulars who never tipped anyone more than a few crumpled bills. Girl, you're a machine. Brittany, the other waitress, had laughed as she brushed past Maya with a tray full of omelets, her blonde ponytail swinging. Ain't you gonna eat or something? Maya had just smiled that same soft smile and patted her own flat stomach. I'm good. I'll grab something later, she had said, the exact words she always used, and Joe had heard them even over the noise of the kitchen and rolled his eyes. Later has a legal name. You know, he had called out from behind the flat top, flipping bacon. It's called a break, and the state says you gotta take it. He had tried to keep his voice light, but there was a rough edge to it, that old tight feeling in his chest from years of counting minutes and money. The owner, Mrs. Green, had just walked through the kitchen with her clipboard, her sharp eyes missing nothing, and had paused to remind him, again, that inspectors loved to ask workers if they got breaks. I'm serious, Joe, she had said, tapping the clipboard with her pen. We get one fine. I'm not paying it alone. Make your people follow the rules. So when he saw Maya wave off her 10 a.m. break, again, telling Brittany to take hers first, Joe had felt that mix of worry and anger rise up like steam. Why was this girl always refusing the one thing everyone else begged for? It wasn't like he had anything against her, he told himself as he slid 3 fat burgers onto plates and shouted for the window to be cleared. If anything, Maya was his best server. She remembered orders without writing them down. She calmed screaming kids with a silly face. She even had a way of talking to old Mr. Johnson, the war vet who scared the younger staff, that made the man soften around his eyes. But there were rules in a kitchen, just like there had been rules in his mama's tiny apartment when he was a boy. And every time Maya said, "I'm fine, I'll eat later," it scratched at something deep inside him. He told himself it was about fairness, about how the other staff noticed she never sat down, how some of them had started grumbling that she was just trying to squeeze in more tips. "Joe, she's messing up the schedule," Brittany had muttered in the walk-in cooler the day before. "If she doesn't take her break now, she'll want it when we're beat. You know how it goes." All of that had been riding on his back when the lunch crowd hit and Maya said she'd step out just for a sec, which was why. 10 minutes later, he had pushed open the back door, ready to drag her back inside, and instead found her in tears, now, standing alone in the swaying heat of the kitchen. Joe tried to shake off the picture of Maya pressed against the brick, whispering about kids who had nowhere to go. He moved on autopilot, dropping frozen fries into bubbling oil, cracking eggs one-handed, shouting, "Order up," at nobody in particular, while his mind wandered back to the bits of her words he had heard. He knew something about being moved around like you were trash. When he was 13, his mom had lost their place after she got laid off from the auto plant, and they had hopped from one aunt's couch to another, sometimes crashing in his uncle's rundown bar in the back by the beer crates. He had learned to steal food and never complain, to act tough so nobody could see how scared he was. Watching Maya fight tears and then pull her smile back on like armor as she walked past him into the dining area twisted that old memory in a fresh way. During the slow stretch after the breakfast rush, Joe caught Maya wiping down the counter by the pie case, her eyes a little red, but her face calm again. "Hey," he called, trying to sound casual. "You, take that break already?" She looked up, surprised, and nodded too fast. "Yeah, chef, I'm good." The lie was so clear it might as well have had neon lights around it. Joe put down the spatula and leaned on the counter. "You know I'm not just busting your chops, right?" he said. "You keep skipping breaks, we get in trouble. Mrs. Green breathes down my neck, I breathe down yours. That's how this dance works." Maya smiled a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know. I'm sorry. I got some stuff to deal with on my breaks, that's all." She glanced toward the front door like she wanted to run. "What kind of stuff?" The question came out sharper than he meant, and her shoulders went up, like she expected a hit. For a split second, he hated himself, hated how easy it was for his voice to sound like his old man's on a bad night. "Look, never mind," he said, backing off. "Just don't disappear on me when we're slammed, okay?" She nodded and went back to polishing the counter in small tight circles, and he went back to the grill, but the wall between them, one he hadn't even known was there, felt thicker now. He told himself it was none of his business, that workers had lives and problems that had nothing to do with him, that he was not her dad or her priest. Still, when the noon crowd thinned and he saw her glance at the clock with that same worried look, the same way you watch a storm coming, he felt his chest tighten. And when she finally slipped off her apron and said, "Gonna take my break now," he watched her head for the back instead of the staff room and felt something in him snap. He waited a full 30 seconds, telling himself he was not going to follow her like some nosy hall monitor, telling himself to flip the chicken and mind his own business. But then Brittany yelled that table 5 wanted to change their order again, and the dishwasher called that he was out of soap. And Joe heard himself say, "Cover the grill. I'll be right back," even as he was already pushing through the swinging door. The cold air of the stockroom brushed his sweaty neck. Then he was in the narrow hall by the back door, his boots loud on the worn tile. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, the metal heavy and squeaky, and stepped into the gray light of the alley, ready with a speech about rules and respect and not playing games with the schedule. Instead, he heard Maya's voice, thin and raw. "Please, Pastor Mike, they're just kids," she was saying. and his words died on his tongue as he let the door close most of the way and listened, feeling more like a thief than a boss by the time she ended the call and turned toward the door. He had already slid back inside, heart pounding like he had been caught doing something wrong instead of trying to catch her. All through the next hour, while burgers sizzled and plates clinked and the radio in the corner played some old country song about broken hearts, Joe caught himself glancing toward the hallway. He saw Maya moving faster than anyone else, her smile so bright it almost hurt, but every now and then her hand would slip into her apron pocket and touch her phone like it was a sore tooth. When the lunch rush finally eased and the ticket rail was blessedly empty for a moment, Joe saw her grab a stack of to-go boxes and start loading them with the food that had come back untouched from a large party that had left in a hurry. "What are you doing?" he called, stepping closer, his tone sharper from habit and worry. She jumped like he had poked her with a live wire. "I was just gonna toss these," she said, her voice to light, not meeting his eyes. The plates in front of her were full of still warm burgers, fries, a grilled cheese cut into triangles, little things that would have gone straight into the trash. Joe crossed his arms. "We don't box up trash," he said. "We toss it." Something flickered in her eyes, a mix of panic and stubbornness. "They're fine," she said. "They've only been out a few minutes." She shut one lid, then another, her hands moving quick like they had done this 100 times. Joe felt his face heat. "Hold up," he said. "You don't just walk out of here with free food, Maya. That's not how this works." The word that wanted to come out of his mouth was theft, the one Mrs. Green always used in staff meetings when she talked about shrinkage and costs, and he could feel it pressing on his tongue. Maya's jaw tightened, and instead of answering, she tucked all 3 boxes into a big brown paper bag, the kind they used for big takeout orders, grabbed the handles, and headed for the back hallway. "Hey," Joe shouted, following her, anger finally catching up with confusion. "I'm talking to you." She didn't stop, just pushed the door open with her hip and slid into the alley. Joe stormed after her, the door banging against the wall, ready to drag her back inside if he had to. But when he stepped into the light and his eyes adjusted, the words tangled in his throat. There, in a loose half-circle near the overflowing dumpster, stood 5 kids in thin coats and torn shoes. Their eyes locked on the paper bag in Maya's hands like it was treasure. The oldest looked maybe 12, the smallest maybe 4, her hair in tiny crooked twists, her nose running in the cold. Maya's hands were shaking as she pulled out the boxers and pressed them into eager little fingers, her face crumpling with every thank you. The kids whispered. "I'm sorry, baby," she murmured to the one left empty-handed when the last box was gone. "I'll bring more tomorrow, I promise. I'm trying." Tears slid down her face again, and Joe, standing there in his white apron with grease stains on it, felt his whole picture of her, of the rules, of what mattered in that moment, flip like a coin in the air. For a long beat, all he could do was stare, his anger melting into something like shame as the boy, with no box, tried to smile anyway and say, "It's okay, Miss Maya. I had cereal at school." The lie was so thin Joe could see right through it. Maya crouched down to his level, her knees cracking on the wet concrete, and wiped his nose with a napkin from her apron pocket. "I'll make it up to you, Jamal," she whispered. "You know I will." The boy leaned into her like he had known her forever, and Joe suddenly understood that the them she had begged God not to lose was standing right here, shivering in front of his dumpster. One of the older girls, her coat 2 sizes too big, noticed Joe first. She stiffened, eyes wide, and tugged at Maya's sleeve. "Miss Maya," she hissed. "There's a man?" Maya spun around, saw Joe, and her face went pale under her brown skin, the way it did inside when someone complained to the manager. For a moment, nobody moved. The kids looked from Joe to Maya and back again, like they were ready to run if he took one more step. Joe raised his hands, palms out, like a cop in a movie, showing he wasn't holding a gun. I came to yell at her for skipping her break, he said, hearing how stupid it sounded the second the words left his mouth. Maya let out a small, broken laugh that had no real humor in it. I know what it looks like, she said, standing up slowly, putting herself a little in front of the kids, without even seeming to think about it. I'm not stealing. It's food that was coming back anyway. I swear, chef. Her chin lifted like she was getting ready for a hit. If you gotta tell Mrs. Green, just tell her it was me. Don't bring them into it. These kids. They didn't do nothing wrong. Joe's eyes went from her tense shoulders to the kids' thin faces, to the grease-stained boxers in their hands, and then back to her again, and something old and hard inside him cracked wide open. How long you been doing this? He asked softly, the anger gone from his voice, replaced by a rough curiosity. Maya blinked, thrown off. A while, she admitted, her fingers twisting in the handles of the empty paper bag, since the Maple Street shelter closed. Those families, they had nowhere to go. Pastor Mike has them sleeping in the church basement when he can, but there's no dinner now, not on Saturdays. I grew up in that shelter, chef. First bed I remember was there. I know what it's like to go to sleep with your belly empty and your head full of grown-up worries. I swore if I ever had more than I needed, I'd bring it back to the kids. She looked down at her sneakers, wet around the edges. I don't have much, just my tips, so I bring what I can. Joe listened, his heart pounding in a slow, heavy way that had nothing to do with clogged arteries and everything to do with truth landing. He thought of how many times he had cursed when food came back untouched, how often he'd dumped full plates straight into the trash without a second thought, how he'd lectured the staff about food costs like it was the only thing that kept them alive. He thought of his own boy, Tyler, safe in his mom's nice apartment 2 states away, never hungry, and of himself at 12, digging half-eaten wings out of a bar's garbage can behind his uncle's place. Why didn't you say something? He asked, his voice rough. Why didn't you ask? Maya gave a sad little shrug. People got their own problems, she said, and I know how y'all look at folks from the shelter. I was that girl once. I just figured it was easier if nobody knew. Back in the kitchen, the bell over the order window dinged as Brittany dropped a new ticket on the rail, and the fryer beeped that the last batch of fries was done. But out in the alley, time seemed to bend around them. Joe stepped closer, the cold wind cutting through his shirt. I don't look at you like that, he said, and even as he said it, he wondered if it was fully true. Hadn't he just been ready to believe the worst? To call her a thief because she broke a rule he had never really explained? I got this thing about rules, he added, rubbing the back of his neck. When everything went to hell when I was a kid, the only thing that made sense was rules. You follow them, maybe you stay out of trouble. But, he looked at the kids, quiet now, watching with wide eyes and greasy fingers. Some rules don't matter as much as I thought. Maya studied his face like she was trying to see if he meant it. For the first time since he'd known her, the smile she gave him wasn't the sweet, practiced one she used on customers. It was small and scared and real. I didn't mean to lie, she said. I just couldn't stand the thought of someone telling me to stop. They count on me, chef. Saturday is the only hot meal some of them get. If I take my break in the staff room, I'm not here, and I can't. Her voice broke, and she looked away. I can't be the kind of grown-up I remember. The one who said, sorry, kid, there's nothing I can do. That night, after the last plate had been washed and the neon open sign had gone dark, Joe sat at the small table in the empty diner, staring at the stack of order sheets and the monthly food cost report Mrs. Green had left on the counter. The numbers swam in front of his eyes, and for the first time, he saw more than dollars. He saw little Jamal's skinny shoulders, the way that smallest girl had hugged the warm box like a teddy bear, the way Maya had stood in front of them like a shield. When Mrs. Green came in from her office, ready to lock up, she found him still there, chewing on the end of a pen like it could somehow help him think better. "Joe, go home," she said, flipping off a row of lights. "You look like someone overcooked you." He took a breath. This was the moment he had been turning over in his head all evening, between grilling bacon and scraping the flat top clean. He could stay quiet, let Maya keep doing what she was doing in secret, pray nobody noticed the missing leftovers. Or he could risk both their jobs by saying something to the woman who signed their checks and counted the cans of beans like they were gold. "I gotta tell you something," he said, the words heavy on his tongue. "But you gotta promise not to start yelling until I finish, okay?" Mrs. Green arched a brow, crossing her arms over her blazer. "That bad, huh?" Joe nodded. "That important," he said. He told her everything, from following Maya outside to finding the kids by the dumpster, leaving out nothing and not trying to paint himself as the hero. "I was ready to call her a thief," he admitted, staring at the floor. "I was all up in my head about rules and costs. Then I saw those kids, and it hit me how dumb I sounded. We throw more food away in one weekend than those kids see all week." Mrs. Green listened without interrupting, her face hard to read in the glow of the one light still on over the counter. When he finished, there was a long silence. "So," she said slowly, "my waitress has been feeding street kids with my food, and my chef knew about it and didn't stop her the second he found out." Joe swallowed. "Yes, ma'am," he said, "and if somebody has to get fired, it should be me. I'm the one who's supposed to keep this place in line." For a heartbeat, he thought she might actually do it. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she walked over to the window, looking out at the wet street, at the orange glow of the streetlights on the puddles. "I grew up over that laundromat on East 21st, she said finally, nodding toward the corner. "We didn't always have enough either. Once a week, the lady at the little diner on the corner would slide me a grilled cheese when my mom was working a double. Said it was extra, even when we both knew it wasn't." She turned back to him, her eyes shiny. "That sandwich was the only reason I didn't go to bed crying some nights." She sighed, the fight leaking out of her shoulders. "We can't just be dumping food while kids are hungry to alleys over." When Maya walked in the next morning, eyes puffy, like she hadn't slept, ready to either keep her head down or defend her secret one last time, she stopped dead at the sight in front of her. On the prep table, next to the stack of clean plates, was a row of shiny metal trays, each one labeled with a strip of tape in Mrs. Green's neat handwriting. "Kids' meals." A big cardboard sign leaned against the wall, the letters crooked, clearly done by hand. But bold, "Heartland Kids Plate, free hot dinner for any child in need. Satin Sun 3 to 5 p.m. Ask for Maya." Joe, already in his apron, leaned on the counter with a tired smile. "Morning," he said. "We waited for you before we started packing them." Maya's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled out of water. I don't understand," she stammered. "You're not mad?" Mrs. Green stepped out from the office doorway, her heels clicking on the tile. "Oh, I'm mad," she said, but there was a spark in her eye that didn't match her words. "I'm mad we didn't think of this sooner." She walked up to Maya and put a hand on her arm. "Next time you see a problem that big, you come to me. We'll figure it out together. Deal?" Tears flooded Maya's eyes again, but these were different, softer somehow. "Deal," she whispered. Joe cleared his throat. "I added a kids' plate section to the prep list," he said, pretending like his own eyes weren't burning. "We'll plan for it, cook for it, make it part of the day. No more sneaking, no more lying." He shot her a look. "But you are still taking your breaks, you hear me? We need you alive and standing to boss those kids around." That first afternoon, when Maya stepped into the alley with foil pans full of hot mac and cheese, green beans, and little chicken strips Joe had cut from the ends he used to throw away, there were more kids waiting than before. Word had already started to spread. This time, though, she wasn't alone. Joe came out behind her, carrying 2 more pans. grumbling about the cold, but standing there just the same, and a few minutes later, Mrs. Green herself appeared with a big box of milk cartons and a roll of paper towels. The kids stared at the grown-ups like they were some new, strange kind of miracle. Jamal ran up to Maya and grabbed her around the waist. "Told the others you'd come," he said into her apron. "They didn't believe me." Maya laughed through her tears and kissed the top of his head. "Guess we showed them," she said. Weeks later, when the local paper ran a small story about the little diner feeding homeless kids on weekends, new faces started showing up. Not just kids, but volunteers with coats and books and offers of help. A church across town opened its basement 3 nights a week. A high school girl started tutoring the older kids at a corner table in the diner after the rush was over. Brittany began cutting fruit into fun shapes so they'll eat something that's not fried. And the dishwasher saved every plastic container he could find. Life at Heartland got busier, messier, louder, but in a way that made Joe's chest feel full instead of tight. He still shouted when burgers burned, still worried over food costs and schedules, but every time he looked at Maya, taking a real break, sitting with 2 little ones, sharing a plate of fries she had actually paid for, every time he saw her laugh without that hard edge of tired fear, he remembered the alley and the way he had almost walked right past her pain. And as he watched her wipe ketchup off a kid's face one Sunday and then stand up to greet a new customer with that wide, honest smile, he knew deep in his bones that the best thing he had ever cooked was not on any menu at all. Because you never know the weight a person is carrying until you stop judging, start listening, and choose to let kindness matter more than the rules.